Well, it is Friday, that's why we're this easy. Good morning, welcome to Morning Cafe. My name is Fred Indimuli. I know it is raining, but you must keep yourself warm and hot. So how hot is the coffee where you are? We'll make it a bit hotter later on. And remember, being Friday, it is a feel-good Friday, so do stand by for a lot more. Karibu sana. Morning Cafe.
And I'm used to Stanley Nyerungita. Definitely, it is a feel-good Friday, and making you feel-good Friday fantastic as possible, getting into the weekend. As much as it is raining, as much as there's floods and mud, we'll be ensuring that tuna cruise through vizuri. And you know who is cruising the weekend fantastic as possible? This gentleman here.
Okay. As you Kenyans suffer the flood situation and all other manner of problems that you're facing, the retired president is actually enjoying some basketball somewhere in the US.
Oh yes, the Boston game.
Now this is called living the life, you know? Oh, mko hapa, machungu, ndimu, nini, jamaa naishi maisha yake salama tu. And even as you continue struggling, the other guy who's supposed to be taking care of us has left as well. And he's in Tanzania to attend, I think, the 60th celebration of something or the other in Tanzania. Then after that, he's going to Zimbabwe. So ebaki hapo na ndimu, kunja sura, weekend imefika, jamaa wako.
On a light note though.
In how you
this is how things are.
That's how you should be spending your weekend. Hapana kasirika kila saa.
No.
Sindio?
Oh yes.
All right. So acha tukwambie maneno ya weather.
We'll be telling you how the weather is looking like. Let me just have the Met Department on that. So giving you the prepare for heavy to very heavy rainfall in Nairobi based on Thursday's forecast. So stay weather aware.
And you see they're actually using capital letters. Prepare for heavy to very heavy rainfall.
So this is focused as of yesterday, getting into today. Yesterday's map had a few of this red, the orange as well as the yellow maps. So this really show millimeters above 40 plus. And well, it's actually 70, between 60 to all the way to 100 millimeters. So I've clicked for Nairobi County itself, just showing the parts that will really receive as high as 100 millimeters. That is very, very high, by the way. Areas
like Roysambu, parts of Dagoretti North, Kibra, Langata, Embakasi South. These are areas that will definitely experience heavy rainfall.
Some parts of Kasarani as well.
Yes, so be ready. I see usikuje kuambiwa ati it happened, no it didn't happen. This is something that's definitely going to happen. These are forecast by the Kenya Meteorological Department.
Oh yes. Let's take a look at another county as well, which also borders Nairobi. So this is Kiambu County, and seeing how things will be looking like parts of Juja, Ruiru as well. Kwanza pa Kiambu, as high as it will be pounding as high as 100 millimeters, getting into some parts of Gatundu, North Pale, Kabete as well. Kikuyu not as much, and that is how things are looking like for Kiambu County. Final one, Machakos. Machakos was had quite the floods for this particular weekend, the previous day. So this is how things will be looking like on the same.
Areas like Mavoko, Matungulu, Kangundo, but Mavoko also covers Syokimau, which is very close to us.
Oh, yes.
And at the river areas as well. So yes.
So if you're there, expect millimeters as high as 50, between 50 to around 60. But then you'll be having guys, just telling you more about this around 6:30.
We'll have some experts in studio to discuss more about the flood situation in the country, because I saw even CNN doing weather forecast for Nairobi. And they talk about how we're going to experience, or we are currently experiencing, double the amount of rainfall that we should be getting.
Oh yes.
Above normal. They're saying it's above normal, but it's double above normal.
Double, yes.
Yes. So
above, actually above 200 plus millimeters.
Yes. So it is definitely a different and special kind of flooding situation. They're talking about flash floods as well. So we're urging caution wherever you are.
And finally, Kajiado. So I'm taking a look at the metropolis of Nairobi. We've taken a look at Kiambu, Machakos, now finally into Kajiado, seeing how things are looking like. We'd be really interested to see how things will be looking like in Kitengela. So this is Kitengela, Kajiado North, yes. And you can see how the weather will be looking like for today. This is today's, getting millimeters as high as past 70 and getting into also 100 plus. So pale Kitengela at the river, the Syokimau, getting into Nairobi as well.
Yes, a bit of rain there as well.
Will be flood, and the meteorological department also warns of floods in these areas that it had mentioned.
Then again, because of the number of rivers in those areas, these are major waterways in Nairobi.
Yes.
So that is where most of the water from all these areas are going to flow towards. So do expect a lot of trouble.
And that is on that. Now let's give you more details on how this the traffic will be affected by the floods.
Right, and if you just look at the traffic situation across Nairobi, and yes, Mombasa Road, if you could start with Mombasa Road, it looks a bit busy. Just before you get to Chumvi area, that's a junction to Machakos, there's a bit of red there. So if you're coming from areas like Salama, Emali, do expect a bit of traffic just before you get to Chumvi area. That is red. I know there are trailers there, but it's never red at this hour. So there could be a situation there. After Chumvi, and Chumvi is that junction once again to Machakos. After that, you can see bits of yellow, meaning the traffic is slow coming towards Athi River. When you get to Athi River and that interchange to Kitengela, it's a bit easy, but after that, at Mlolongo, a bit of a snarl up there as well, bits and pieces of yellow. Then you come closer to Embakasi, Cabanas. It gets better as you get towards town. So yes, if you're using Mombasa Road from Kitengela towards Nairobi, nothing much to report about, but yes, before Chumvi area, there could be a situation there. Coming all the way into town, still on Mombasa Road, past Imara Daima, past Capital Center, it is okay so far. And vidole zimekula ugali hapa. Yes. So that's one of the major tributaries into town. The other one is Langata Road. And looking at Langata Road, past the Bomas of Kenya, all the way. This is Southern Bypass, yes. Langata Road is looking nice. So far, so good. It's green all the way past Wilson Airport. Actually, Langata Road is looking very comfortable at this hour. Nothing to report there. All the way down to the Nyayo Stadium roundabout. A bit of a yellow here along Bagadi Way. Just after you get past Kenyatta Market, there's a bit of yellow as you get closer to a city mortuary roundabout. Ngong Road is looking good as well, all the way from the bypass past the Junction Mall, all the way past Prestige Mall. Bits and pieces of yellow here and there, probably matatus picking up passengers, but after that, nothing much. Getting into town. Let's take a look at Jogoo Road. And Jogoo Road, as always, bits of red, especially around Makadara area. Opposite the Makadara low courts, once you get all the way past Buruburu, you get to Makadara, a bit of a slowdown. It's getting as dark, getting a dark red, almost maroon, so probably there will be a slowdown there. After that, Nyue into town. Expect a slowdown at the City Stadium roundabout, and after that, you can get into town comfortably. Finally, the other major tributary into town is Thika Highway. The super highway is good so far, coming all the way from Githurai. Okay, let's go as far back as Ruiru. We just see past, yes, from Ruiru it's green, past Kenyatta University main campus it's green. So meaning you can drive smoothly past Githurai, past Kasarani, the interchange. Nothing much to report about as you get to the Garden City Mall. Past Allsops, green all the way past KCA University, the Utali Drift, Mathari Mental Hospital, and even the Pangani interchange is looking comfortable as at this hour. Finally, Kiambu Road, this is very close to us here, and Kiambu Road, nothing to report at this hour. It is green all the way into town. That's the traffic situation in Nairobi as we speak.
All right. Let's tell you what to expect in our news diary before we take a look at some newspaper bits on, and mostly now in the regional papers. Let's have the news diary for you, telling what you need to know. So first off, on the first page of our news diary, and the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Health will be meeting with a number of cabinet secretaries, including Health, Susanna Kumicha, Labour, Florence Bore, the Treasury, Professor Njuguna Ndungu, Public Service Commission, CS Moses Kuria, as well as representatives from the Council of Governors, KMPDU, Salaries and Remuneration Commission, as well as Public Service Commission, just to get a solution on the health impasse. It is it 44 today? Yes.
Yes, it enters the 44th day today.
44th day today. Into party politics on the next page. And phase one of the UDA grassroots elections will be conducted today in these counties, namely Nairobi, Narok, West Pokot, Busia, Homa Bay, Isiolo, and Garissa. And the voters will be voting for grassroots officials for the polling center, ward, constituency, and county levels. We'll be telling you more on that. On to the next page, and President William Ruto will be beginning his 2-day state visit to Zimbabwe as a chief guest in the 64th edition of the Zimbabwe International Trade Fair. And the visit will see the president sign a number of bilateral cooperation instruments between health, defense, investment, education, as well as transport between the two countries. And finally, schools are opening on Monday, so how prepared is the country? And all regional directors of education have until today to submit data they've collected as directed by the Ministry of Education to ascertain the readiness of reopening in all basic education institutions as of next week, Monday. This is going to be quite interesting, just seeing how the kind of data they give, because when you take a look at a number of schools around the country, they have been marooned by floods. Well, sort of, it's quite fortunate, so to speak, right now, because the students are not in school at the moment. Yes. But then, as of Monday, when the floods and the rains continue to pour, the students will be in schools. So it's going to be interesting to see how things will be.
We'll be asking our experts to explain to us the kind of situation we're looking at, especially once schools reopen next week.
Oh, yes.
All right, and that's a diary and quick little tidbits about everything that's happening today. Let's now take a look at the newspapers. Time for us to take a look at the dailies and the beautiful Geshambi. Our weekend queue is here. Geshambi, good to see you this morning.
Good morning, friends.
I see you there. The weekend is here.
The weekend is here.
All right, let's take a look at the dailies and we kick off with the Standard. Revealed plan to put civil servants or job contracts is a big headline on the front page of the Standard this Friday. Wage bill battle, and this comes, exactly 2, 3, 4 days before Labor Day. This will be the biggest discussion. Yeah. The fact that there's a plan. The employment status of all civil servants will be converted from permanent and pensionable to contractual terms if plans to be presented to the Cabinet by Public Service Cabinet Secretary are adopted. The story is on page 5. We have a quote there by the CS for Public Service. Moses Kurie says there is something wrong when 1 million people take half of our tax revenues and 53 million people take the balance. That's the justification behind that proposal. Still, the biggest discussion has been on the floods, and there's an image there on the front page of the Standard on the flooding situation with a Boda Boda rider with a passenger and cargo wading through floods somewhere in Kitengela. A Boda Boda rider navigates a treacherous and flooded section of the road in Kitengela town yesterday following a heavy downpour. And the story reads like this: 45 killed, tens of thousands displaced by raging floods. The government moves in to assist the displaced with food and shelter, even as the Kenya Meteorological Department warns that heavy rainfall, they've actually said very heavy rainfall, will continue pounding many parts of the country in the next 5 days. And yes, as we informed you earlier, on State of the Nation this morning, we'll be having experts on matters of flood situation and rescue efforts. Will be explaining to us more on this. Still on the front page of the Standard, how CBC exam will differ from KCPE, KCSE. They say CBC learners will be spared the rigors of 844 with grade 12 candidates. Now grade 12 will be the equivalent of Form 4. Yes? So 12 years, grade 12. Grade 12 candidates expected to fight for only 70% marks in a NEC national election. I should have been born in this day and age.
You know?
The day I did my KCPE, which...
Oh, you did KCPE. We thank God you did KCPE. I actually thought you did CPE.
Actually, there's...
KCPE in the 90s.
There's one
before you were even an idea. And we used to carry books until the bag just tears. Anyway, I thought things were getting easier, but for CBC probably to live and get better. But we have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Matters politics on the front page of the Standard. Elections, moment of truth for Ruto, Raila parties. I'm still skeptical about whether or not this grassroots elections will happen. They're supposed to kick off today for UDA. We'll have to wait and see.
But you saw the ballot boxes on Itumbi's page. I think they'll actually happen. And Nairobi campaigns are intense.
ODM about 10 years ago in 2014, tried to do it. They actually organized everything, ballot boxes, IEBC was there. It was actually at Kasarani. Then some few men in black showed up.
Oh, yeah.
And the rest is history. That election never happened. Still on the front page of the Standard, the top highlights on the top strip, police killed 118 people. This is according to human rights groups. Extrajudicial killings by police, 118. Wow. Also a bid to close Kenya-US trade gap. Klopp's hope to leave on high dims. Yes, this is after that 2-0 thrashing by Everton, which puts a smile on my face. Actually, a very huge wide grin on my face. And yes, the pulse is there. The pulse. Gashambi, do you want to look at the pulse now?
Pulse is here. I think the biggest story in the Pulse, apart from the babe who's on the front page, Nyaringita, what's up, is the dangers of bat chugging. This has been a conversation lately, and it's interesting. I hear it started during your days in Dimuli.
What?
Bat chugging.
I have no idea what that is, and it sounds very
You distance yourself away from it.
So what kids nowadays are doing, instead of taking alcohol via their mouth, they're doing it by, they're inserting things like a tampon via their butt.
It should be against the Ten Commandments to do something like that, surely.
I know. It's been dangerous.
You know, there are things that I don't think Lord Jesus Christ can even forgive. There's some things he'll say, okay, fine, hapo umepita mpaka sasa. Hata wewe unaona.
But they're saying you parents have become too strict, so they don't want to have, going home.
Parents have become strict.
Right now, at this age.
If I remember my parents back in the 80s and 90s. Anyway.
Yeah, that's the biggest story
right.
on this Pulse.
Okay, we can move on to the Daily Nation, Nyaringita.
We can move on to the Daily Nation and see what is happening on this paper. Succession row leaves rich Moi Kinbrook, and they say former President Daniel Arap Moi, in power over 2 decades, was also one of the country's wealthiest men. But barely 4 years after his death, some members of his family are finding it difficult to foot the bills, thanks to an ongoing succession battle over his multi-billion shilling estate. Was on pages 2 and 3.
And that's just a sad story, because when everyone knows your family has money, and then you start saying you're broke. Because I saw the family, part of the family holding a harambe to raise funds for medical for one of the grandsons of the late president.
Yes.
It's sad.
It is.
But then on the bottom, rather the middle strip, there's a very interesting story here. So this is on Moi's on page 3. They say no love, no marriage. Judge allows couple to divorce on grounds of quote unquote lost feelings. Mapenzi kisha, and the court is just saying, you know what, fine.
Haiwezi rudi.
Oh yes, and let me give you more context on this on page 3. So a court in Nakuru says the end of love and emotional attachment in a marriage is a reason enough to grant divorce. So, according to the justice, no man and woman can be bound by law or religion where no love and feelings exist in holding the marriage together.
Now, who determines the end of love or feelings? How do you know that this is the end? Because it comes in waves.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. So how do you determine that this is the end?
I've actually read the article, and I think he's onto something, the judge, or she. I don't know. These people were married for 20 years. But the ground, if you really look at the article, yes, the ground is basically on cruelty, which is a ground allowed, because the guy says that the woman is a squanderer, and on top of that, she's an emotional abuser.
And just to quote what the aggrieved husband says, she continues to assault me by following me to my workplace and hurling abuses at me in front of my customers and staff.
Wow. Okay.
20
so
years
that's how the end of love looks like.
So it looks like
it reaches a very toxic place to be. That, and among others, senators push for review of laws on the removal of governors is a story on the front page. More flood stories on this paper. The front page, they say households in flood-prone areas face eviction, says Ruto. And I mean, Kenyans on X are just a wild lot. The president was talking about this on his, had this posted on his X page, and Kenyans were on the comment section, they're asking, why now? Why, you know, and there's so much Kenyans had to say on the same. So, yes.
So them saying if it were Israel, I didn't like that statement, but yeah. So them saying if it were Israel, he'd have commented about it a long time ago.
Well, the president is currently not even in the country. He's in Tanzania. But even if you look at the dailies in Tanzania, it's not anything better. If we can have probably Mwananchi or the front page of the Citizen from Tanzania. My director, if you can help me with that. The story is even, yes, this is the situation in Tanzania. The flooding situation is not just in Kenya. This is the front page of the Mwananchi. Mvua ya maafa, habari kuu pale kwenye ukurasa wa mbele. Watu 7 wapoteza maisha kwa kusombwa na mafuriko, wamo watoto 3 wa familia moja. Vifo vyafikia 162. Majaliwa watoa maagizo 14. Hali tete, wananchi wa haha, gharama za maisha juu, miundombinu yaharibiwa zaidi. And you can just see that image there.
Yes.
You know, I think even Kenyan photographers should do us justice and get a photo like this one.
Yeah.
We seem to be getting very many close-up photos of situations. This
need a bird's eye view. And Fred, yes. so that's that. But let me also show you another photo here of how things are looking like. Now this is still in Tanzania. And
that's the front page of the Citizen.
The Citizen. And they say death, destruction as deluge swamps Tanzania as well as Kenya. So they're talking about heavy rains and severe flooding and wrecking devastation across East Africa, having already claimed dozens of lives and displaced thousands in Tanzania and Kenya in the recent 2 weeks. So that photo is in Tanzania. It has just rummaged through a bridge and made it impassable.
162 people dead is a huge number.
It's a huge number because in Kenya we're talking about 45. But you see, these are the recorded numbers or reported numbers. There are places that are so remote that we can never get the news on time, and probably the numbers will go high. I think in Tanzania it's because some of this is happening a lot in urban areas, places like Dar es Salaam and other towns like that. But I think this allows me to go to my highlight of the week. Was I think somewhere in Ukambani where I saw a police chopper save a young boy about 6 years or so who had been marooned by floods, and the family were on the other side. Everyone else was on the other side. So you could actually see the boy where he is totally marooned by floods. He's all alone. And the only way, because the floods were actually swelling, they were going to swallow up most of the land where the boy was. And a police chopper just showed up and landed on that area, and the boy was saved just like that. And to me, those are just some of the inspiring stories that are coming out of this flood situation.
Oh, yes.
So that's my highlight of the week.
Wow, that's beautiful. As a consumer of the internet, I don't know. I did not.
There's a lot of bad news.
Yeah.
Yes, but once in a while, even out of disaster or tragedy, there's always 1 or 2 inspiring stories.
Most definitely. Kishambi, your highlight?
My highlight is not really a highlight. It's what has been on my mind lately. I think the many deaths we've been experiencing, you know, from the KDF, the 10 KDF officers, to I also lost a relative, my father's brother, last week.
Condolences.
Yeah, actually, the plane crash happened on the day we buried him, and I was just thinking, wow, life is fickle. Life is really fickle. And the older you get, I have never lost someone who's like really close to me, apart from our friends back in the day. And I keep thinking, the older I get, the more, you know, I'm exposed to losing someone.
The more you interact with death.
Yes, the more you interact
with
death.
And
it is scary. And I was just thinking, I don't think I'm fearful of death, like of dying. But I'm scared of losing someone. I have read every of Chimamanda's book, every of her book, apart from Notes on Grief. I cannot bring myself to read that book because I don't think I need it. I usually say I'll read it when I need it. But yeah, it's crazy. But there's something, because Zulu said that was really resonated with me yesterday on his blog. He said that death is a reminder to the living to keep living.
Oh, yes.
Now that's a spoiler. I'm piling up because Zulu's blogs to read them later.
Oh.
Just a line.
My highlight would be, again, the floods. I think the day before yesterday, I was alighting a bus, and then I think it was around 10 p.m. So just getting out of, just near where I live, it was floods and, you know, the water rushing through the roads. I've never seen such kind of water. just running through the road like that. In all those years I've lived where I live. And, I'm walking in between the road and the water is, getting into my shoes. I was like, wow. The amount of... Now, I was trying to imagine if I was somewhere, else and the water was just knee level, it would have been crazy.
It can actually be very scary because you've seen how vehicles are carried away by the water. So you can imagine you as a human being, even that because they see a certain height, a certain level of water can actually carry you away. We'll be getting a lot of these details from the experts in a short while. And a quick look at the cartoons this morning, and the cartoon on page 16 of the Daily Nation still talks about the flooding situation. Now as you get into the caricature, and the cartoon has an ark, the Noah's Ark, because people are now drawing parallels with the Noah's Ark. But this ark is actually submerged in water. It's a government ark. And then there's a sign there that a multi-agency response team on floods meeting is currently in progress. So they're holding a meeting inside the ark, but they don't realize that the ark is already submerged in the flood waters. Just talking about the kind of delayed response. Sometimes you wonder whether the same people working in government or in this disaster response mechanism are really in touch with what's happening on the ground. And many people have actually blamed Sakaja for this. But if you look at the front pages of Tanzania newspapers, you can actually see that this is beyond any government official. It is a situation that we have to deal with either way. That's a cartoon on the Daily Nation.
I hope our digital people have captured that. Fred, you're about to have a field with your
Understand?
This is a standard. The caricature is on UDA elections, grassroots elections today. And there's someone here, a voter, saying, I know who I... And then a party honcho saying wants. I think we've seen the who's and who's in UDA from the deputy president, Gachagua, pick favorites. It's interesting to know how that, especially in Nairobi, we are all waiting.
So according to this cartoonist, the elections won't mean much.
So
the leaders have already been chosen. All right.
On to People Daily, page 10 of the People Daily. The government whipping this doctrine, saying you are fired, but he's actually just whipping the pillow. It reminds me back in the day, ukichapwa na mwalimu
unaweka vitu huko nyuma.
Unaweka vitu huko nyuma. You're wearing 2 shorts and I don't know how many things in there. And this doctor is just smiling. Actually, the section of KMPDU, WJ Taylor, has announced that they're going to have a peaceful demonstration on the 30th. That's on Tuesday next week. So just them relenting and saying, we are still...
I saw them sing a couple of songs. Very interesting. And such kind of people you can't joke around with them. When they already come up with songs, unawaachia hapo.
I saw a member of parliament tell them a good dancer knows when to leave the stage.
All right. So as we had promised today on State of the Nation, we'll be looking at the floods disaster. And we'll be having a couple of experts in studio. Do you have that poster, Yaringita?
Yes. There you have it.
Yes. Gershom Mwakazi, Congress Call Director, Disaster Management at World Vision, as well as Fred Majiwa, Head of Programs at St. John's Ambulance. They will be in studio to help us understand more about the flood disaster. Later on the show?
Later on, we get into matters the Full Good Friday, and Senjay, a comedian, will be joining us. Just to crack our ribs, you were saying, si lazima ukume, kasirika, sura kama ndimu. Yes. That's what we'll be doing later on. Obviously, on the ones and twos, DJ Rhymes will be here. Just making sure that the Feel Good Friday looks as fantastic as possible. And some modern dance group giving us... Gashambi and I are very too... I don't know if worst is the Ama utasema nijiongelele.
We, kila mtu, we.
Gashambi is in red, I can tell Gashambi is in red, and there's a lot hidden behind this table. So do stand by. After 8 a.m., a lot will be revealed.
Oh, yeah. Today I even have dancing shoes just to ensure that I have the moves and all that.
All right, a lot to look forward to right here on Morning Cafe. You can interact with us on our social media pages, on X at TV47 News, and on Facebook at TV47 Kenya. Do stand by for a lot more. Now we take a break. We'll be back in a short while.
move Kenyans living in flood-prone areas in a move to caution Kenyans from further effects of floods. President William Ruto making this pronouncement following 2 devastating weeks occasioned by the raging fury of floods that so far left 10,000 households homeless. Mwige William with more.
For the second week now, heavy downpour resulting to floods continue to be witnessed in different parts of the country. The extreme weather leading to deaths and destruction. According to figures from the Kenya Red Cross, 23 counties have been affected by floods. More than 20,000 families affected, with 10,000 families left homeless. In Nairobi alone, more than 10 people have been reported dead due to floods. And after a long silence, President William Ruto finally addressed the situation.
There are citizens living in very dangerous places, and those are the most vulnerable at this point. And I'm happy the Minister for Energy is here, so that we can begin to inform citizens if they are in places that poses danger to them. We begin to relocate them. President Ruto adding that the National Youth Service will provide temporary shelter for affected families, although not giving a clear strategy that the government will put in place to avert further destruction by floods. I think in that context, what are the flashpoints and how do we, ahead of time, deal with those flashpoints? How do we mobilize members of the National Government Administration to support all this effort? These as Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua announced that a meeting has been scheduled for Friday, with floods being top of the agenda.
The outlook for the next week indicates that the country will receive above normal rainfall across the country. In that regard, all members of the public are urged to exercise caution while traveling and where they are in lowlands to move to higher grounds. But as the national government now shifts its focus to floods, Kenyans for the better part of the past 2 weeks have been grappling with the pain and loss caused by floods. The Meteorological Department has predicted the rains will continue until June this year. Mwigi William, TV 47.
The heavy rains being experienced in the country have left more than 60,000 people displaced and 38 people dead. Kenyans losing faith in the government's preparation in dealing with the effects of the floods. Our reporter Ruga with the details.
We prepare for the challenges that will come with El Nino, and we have sufficient information to the people of Kenya.
In December last year, the Global Climate Forecast presented a letter revealing that heavy rains will be experienced in East Africa. According to the global forecast, they indicated that the rains to be received would be slightly high and were expected to start by the end of the year in 24 counties. However, it didn't rain as expected, and so many seemingly ignored the forecast.
Ile El Nino haitakuweko, wamesema kutakuwa tu na mvua kubwa, lakini haitafika pale ya kuharibu.
4 months later, the Kenyan Meteorological Department announced the rains which had already started gradually in the month of March this year.
The expected rainfall amount is likely to be above the long-term average for the season.
The rains began, and for a good fraction, in under 24 hours, the rains caused flooding. So far, more than 34 counties have been affected by the floods. In Nairobi, 26 schools, city roads and residential areas have also been affected. The floods disrupting daily activities as Kenyans remain doubtful of the government's readiness to mitigate destruction caused by the floods. Ruga Ival, TV 47.
Now, following heavy rainfall across the country, residents of Mathare slums are now appealing to the government to get help after floods continue to wreak havoc, claiming lives and leaving many of them displaced. The lack of government response has forced the community to rely solely on its resources to cope with the flooding and its aftermath.
This is the exact picture you'll encounter when visiting Mathare for air, with the residents here trying to salvage what is left and rebuilding the structures again for their families' shelter following heavy floods which marooned the area. The heavy rains that occurred on Tuesday night forced other residents out of their houses, with some having to seek refuge on the rooftops. The slow pace of the county government response has forced the community to rely solely on its resources to cope with the flooding and its aftermath.
Sasa ni kusaidia tu maskini vile inaweza endelea na maisha. Sio mambo ya kungoa hawa waende wapi. Mtu kama mimi nimekuwa hapa 43 years. Unataka kunitoa sasa nitaenda wapi?
Rescue and search operations for missing individuals is underway, with the 4 bodies retrieved today. Frederick Ojiro is an officer from Haki Africa and is part of the response and emergency team.
Ni dhahiri shahiri familia ifike na wafikiwe na serikali ifike pia ione hali halisi vile iko, na wache tu kuambia watu hameni, wahame waende wapi? Wahame waende wapi? Hata wakihama wahame njaa. Kwa hivyo serikali, wacha serikali behave. Let the government behave like a government.
With schools expected to be opened next week, the situation remains dire for many of them as learning materials were swept away by raging floods. Survivors are now calling on the government to intervene quickly before the situation worsens.
Sasa serikali isaidie watu yake na chakula na tupate tu nafasi ya kukata, kama tutatoka kwa mto 30 mita angalau turudishe ndio tupate vile tunaweza kaa.
Tuko katika ile hali ya wewe mwenyewe kujitetea. So hizi familia ukiangalia hapa waliponea na zile nguo wamevaa na zile kidogo pia zimelowa na maji. Sasa hata kifua hiyo nguo itakauka lini?
This is the current situation here in Mathare Area 4, among many other areas in Nairobi County, with the residents calling upon the government to intervene, since many of them are grappling with the effects of floods. Nelson Mwareza, TV47, Nairobi.
And meanwhile, more than 100,000 people have been displaced in the country following the heavy rains that have burst river banks, causing floods in more than 24 counties in the country. The floods have caused the death of more than 38 people, while others remain displaced. The displaced flood victims have been forced to camp in schools, dispensaries, or churches, with fears that schools may not resume next week.
This is a clear picture that depicts the current situation in the country, where most people affected by the heavy rains causing floods and camping to at least get a place to lay their heads.
Ni shauri ya maji. Mvua inanyesha nyingi na maji imefika mpaka kwa nyumba. Sasa hatuna maisha tunaweza tukaishi. Ndipo tumeona kama tukuja hapa juu ya Simbi, ndipo tuwe na makao.
Maji. Mpaka nikajirumia, nikashindwa nitafanya nini. Hata sina kitu ya kufunika. Wale watoto wangu hata kitabu ya kwenda shule mande sina yeni, hata vile mnaniona hivi mimi sina hata. Ni jirani ndiye amenisaidia.
Those displaced by the floods are facing challenges at the places where they are camping as they lack basic needs. Some say that they have fears that teenagers may easily get lured into engaging into bad behaviors, leading to the rise of teenage pregnancy.
I find that most of our girls are at risk of getting pregnant. We have the problems of early pregnancy, and they are at risk of even getting married at this point, because if someone offers a solution right now, it's easy to go with that.
School heads also fear that the affected families camping in schools will affect the opening of schools next week. The Education Principal Secretary Belio Kipsang has however said that the government has put up measures for schools to resume normally next week.
We've been blessed with quite some rain, and I know yesterday the president directed a multi-agency team to be able to deal with the challenges that have come with the rains, and these are part of the preparation of ensuring that our children will smoothly fit into their schools next week as we open.
Anastasia Mkabi, TV47.
And the body of a police officer who was last month swept away by raging floods in Nairobi's Country Bus station while trying to rescue 4 people marooned by floods is yet to be retrieved. On Wednesday, a multi-agency team embarked on an operation on the scene of his disappearance in a spirited effort to retrieve his body. Lennox Sangre has been following this and gives you the latest.
The hope of finding their beloved one is what parents of Kamukunji Police Officer David Chesire are still clinging to. At the famous Machakos bus station, the scene of crime where Constable David Chesire disappeared has once again become a place of interest in the search for the officer who was swept away while rescuing 4 stranded traders marooned by heavy rains pounding Nairobi. His distraught mother clinging on to hope.
Nilikuwa naomba tu nisaidiwe tu mtoto wangu apatikane, na akipatikana nitarudishia Mungu shukrani. Nimekuwa na huzuni mingi sana.
Anafanya kazi mzuri ya serikali, alifanya kazi mzuri, akaokoa mwananchi. Ingependa tu serikali atupe nguvu kidogo, aongeze bali imefikia, tuone kama nipate nafasi ya kushika mtoto yangu.
The multi-agency team encompassing those from the National Police Service handling disasters and regular police pooled resources in the aftermath of seeing Chesire's body retrieved. Here, the bulldozers returned to the same site, with police officers believing Chesire is lying here, flanked with his AK-47 rifle.
This is the place of interest because this is the point where he fell. So from some kind of scientific modeling, we are sure that he may still be here because we have scored the river up to Ruai. We have not found any leads. So we are now coming back to the point where he was swept away.
Amid the pounding rains in the country, Chesire's family, including his wife, father, mother, and nuclear family members, have been camping here at the site to retrieve their son.
Mwanzo nilisema nilimuomba Mungu anipe nguvu ya kustahimili yote nilipopata habari na nimeona mkono wake.
According to the police privy to the investigations, new details have emerged of the decomposing body of a police officer that was retrieved around River Wote, awaiting post-mortem to ascertain the identity. The officer, who was in the company of his colleagues when they came across 3 women and a child trapped in one of the stalls where a concrete slab had caved in. The 10 p.m. incident saw the officers quickly swing into action, successfully rescuing 4. However, Chesire went back to lock the doors before being swept away. Chesire was swept away together with his rifle and AK-47. It is nearly 2 months since Constable David Chesire was swept away by the marauding waters, with those spearheading this operation believe that they will retrieve him. Lennox Sengre, TV47, Nairobi.
All right, remember our conversation today, getting into the floods. We'll be telling you, and the experts will be telling you what you need to know on all this. Let's focus on something else now. As the doctors' strike enters its 44th day today, the doctors maintain that the strike is still on, with the weekly demos set to resume next week. On the other hand, the Minister of Health has called on the healthcare providers to go back to work and save the ailing health sector. Our health reporter, Elizabeth Atieno, tells us more.
Strengthened by doctors' solidarity, the Kenya Medical Practitioners, Pharmacists and Dentists Union now says they will not relent in fighting for the rights of medical interns, just a day after Public Service CS Moses Kuria maintained that the government will not pay the interns the 206,000 Kenya shillings that they are demanding.
We are now back to our 19 demands in full, in total, because we do not trust their words.
We are saying that we had negotiated 7 years ago, and therefore we should not be used as guinea pigs for wage bill.
And as the push and pull between the medics and the government intensifies, Health CS Susan Akumicha has yet again extended an olive branch to the striking medics, urging them to resume work so as to solve the medical interns issue.
We have been talking, we have had very good progress, 18 out of 19 issues resolved, 6.1 billion shillings given to doctors. Please come back to work. Let's discuss that one small thing. The Bible says, whoever does not work does not eat.
From next week, Tuesday, we're going to resume our weekly demonstration.
The government has since maintained that it can only afford to pay the medical interns 70,000 monthly, and now the doctors say they will respond by not generating revenue for the country.
And if not so, then we want to offer free services to Kenyans because we are not paid, because we cannot be generating revenue for this country, and we are not paid, we are not remunerated.
It has been saying propaganda that they offered us 18 out of the 19 issues, but I must say that they have not.
Doctors say threatening them with sacking is similar to threatening a fish with drowning, adding that the government should fire all of them and not just specific doctors. Elizabeth Atieno, TV47, Nairobi.
And hundreds of friends and family members were among those who turned up for the burial of Sergeant Rose Nyawira, who was among the Kenya Defence Force personnel who lost their lives in a helicopter crash at Sindar area, Elgeyo Marakwet County. Tributes were poured with Sergeant Rose being eulogized as a bubbly lady who was obedient and hardworking. Rose served as a photographer of the Chief of Defence Forces press. She lives behind a 3-year-old son.
Emotions were at high today at Kagia Town in Mwea East Sub-County, Kirinyaga County during the burial of Sergeant Rose Nyawira. Sergeant Rose, who was among the military officers who met their sudden death following a helicopter crash at Sindar, Elgeyo Marakwet, has been eulogized by friends and family as an obedient and hardworking lady. Her uncle, Philip Mwangi, read a heartfelt tribute from Rose's father, who was overwhelmed with emotions.
He was a doting father who worked with her. Let us face it, a child is a special gift in the life of a parent.
The burial ceremony that was attended by hundreds of family members and friends saw Rose being showered with praise.
One quality, that is loyalty.
Kenya Air Force Deputy Commander Brigadier Peter Kithinji condoled with the family, eulogizing Rose as someone who was committed to her duty to the country.
Nobody knows the day and the way, but eventually we'll all leave this world. It's a transition.
Sergeant Rose Nyawira has left behind a 3-year-old son. Elsewhere in Alego Songa, the family of Sergeant Clifford Somondi are making preparations for the burial of their son, who met the same fate on the 18th April crash.
We are planning to bury Clifford on 3rd of May 2024.
The helicopter crash claimed the lives of 10 officers, including Chief of Defence Forces Francis Ogola, who was buried on Sunday, April 21st in Siaya County. Vera Alberta, TV47.
Meanwhile, President William Ruto has officially opened Bunge Towers, questioning members of parliament over the launch of the Bunge Tower, which cost the taxpayer 9.6 billion cash shillings, is bound to attract more scrutiny and accountability on the mandate. As a senior parliamentary reporter Elizabeth Mutuku reports, President William Ruto emphasized that lawmakers have no excuse in delivering on the mandate to the electorate, given the improved infrastructural amenities.
Today, President William Ruto led top government officials and parliamentary leadership to commissioning the long-awaited Bunge Tower. President Ruto and other leaders calling for cost-cutting measures concerning committee meetings, which, according to the House leadership, incurred significant expenses when held outside Parliament buildings. National Assembly Majority Leader Kimani Ichung'wah says that a single committee meeting could amount to 1.5 million Kenya shillings per day.
Now that we have all the facilities here, the meeting rooms, committee meeting rooms, I hope I will see a significant drop, Mr. Speaker, in the budget of Parliament.
Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua urging MPs to refrain from enjoying the comfort of Bunge Towers, adding that they should prioritize their responsibility to electorate and focus on service delivery. His sentiments were also echoed by Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi.
Sasa hiyo comfort nimeona pale, mkaekae hapo Friday mteremuke mashinani. Hapo ndio maneno iko, because hapa ni mzuri lakini maneno iko pale.
Comes with elevated competition. I'm sure politicians out in the field are now looking at this. Mujichunge sana wajumbe.
And this also could be a blessing in disguise for the public should they implement the cost-cutting vision by the leadership of Parliament. National Assembly Speaker Moses Wetangula allayed fears that money had been embezzled ever since the construction of the facility began in the year 2014, castigating those spewing vitriol on the project.
To allay the skeptics who have been pouring vitriol on the structure, the rejectionists, and many others who have been saying many things. This building is here. We will use it, and it will serve the purpose for which it was meant.
Therefore, for this project, Your Excellency, if I were to be asked, I would give it a clean bill of health.
Elizabeth Mutuko, TV47, Nairobi.
And that is on the news updates that we had for you. But right now, though, the conversation of the day today matters disaster management. And the experts are right here, the gentleman right here, Gershon Mwakazi, Director Disaster Management, World Vision, as well as Fred Majua, Head of Programs, St. John Ambulance. Fred, over to you.
Thank you so much, Stanley. Yes, we'll be getting into that discussion shortly. Do stand by for that. You could ask us questions as well. The experts are here with us through our social media pages on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. Once again, Fred Majua, Head of Programs at St. John's Ambulance. Karibu sana. It's good to have you in studio.
Thank you.
And Gershom Mwakazi, Director, Disaster Management at World Vision. Gentlemen, this whole week we've had a very gruesome headlines with regard to the bigger story, what's happening in the country and in the region, the issue of flooding. The headline on the front page of the Standard with regard to this piece of news says 45 killed, tens of thousands displaced by raging floods. The Daily Nation takes note of what the president said. Yesterday, he said the government would evict families living in flood-prone areas. He directed the National Youth Service to provide land to settle those in the most affected regions. We'll be focusing more on the issue of safety, because we see even from the photos, people still wading through the water and how this is ending up. But as we start off the discussion, kindly paint a picture of your understanding of the current flood situation. We start with you, Bwana Fred Majua. Is this worse than what we've ever seen before in as far as flooding is concerned?
This is not worse than what we have seen before, but of course it paints a picture of lack of preparedness, because over the years we know that we have two seasons of rainfall. The long ones, which we are experiencing now, and then we'll have the short ones, which is starting in October. But most of the time, the authorities are caught napping, and in the aftermath of it, we have people losing their lives, we have several properties being destroyed, we have people who are being displaced, and even the infrastructure is destroyed. This takes our economy back, and so it calls for every effort to ensure that we put in place mechanisms that can first prevent the worsening of these situations, but also to protect the lives and properties that we always see getting destroyed.
And Bwana Mwakazi, we've seen the meteorological department giving a forecast that this rains will continue for the next about 2, 3, 4 days, and they're describing it as heavy to very heavy rainfall, and they put it in capital letters on their X account. We've also seen forecast, I think, broadcast on CNN, talking about the region and the kind of heavy rainfall in the region. Yes, we do have the long rains every year, but there's a feeling that this time around, this one could be a bit different. Is that the case?
Yes, because based on the information provided by the weatherman, meteorological department, the rains are surpassing the long-term average. Because ordinarily we would work with the long-term average to qualify what is normal rains, what is below normal or above normal. So based on what we are seeing and information from the experts, these are not normal rains because they have surpassed the thresholds that would qualify them to pass as average long-term.
mean that has been observed for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to loss of life, because every time we are flooding, we always see people die, people are displaced, and one may wonder, okay, where are we getting it wrong? You mentioned this, Wanamajiwa, that lack of preparedness is always there. We have rains every year. We have two seasons of rains. We have the long rains and the short rains.
Yeah, sure.
How come we are perpetually not prepared?
First, I think we need to inculcate that culture of preparedness, starting from the very local level as we go upwards to the national level. As individuals, we've also seen lives which are being lost, not only because there was lack of preparedness, but because people really underestimate the strength of moving water. You see somebody in a vehicle trying to cross a river that has swollen, and they imagine that the vehicle is too heavy, that it cannot be swept downstream by the moving water. So these are just ordinary underestimation of the strength of the moving water.
How heavy is there's always the assumption that my car is heavy to cross through the water, but we've seen trucks,
even houses,
yes, we've seen even big trucks.
Yes.
Okay, probably paint a picture of what level of water is dangerous for a motorist.
For any water level that is above the knee level, you should not cross it either as a pedestrian or even as a motorist. Because if you try to cross it, you will either be driving to your death or walking to your death. But besides being swept downstream, there are other dangers that are in this water. This water could be contaminated and you could be affected by it. This water could be even connected to a live electrical wire that you could be electrocuted. This same water could be carrying even venomous snakes that can bite you, or even some objects that can punch your legs. So you need to always take caution that whenever you spot such kind of flooded waters, you should avoid it or move to safety as fast as possible, using the shortest route. But sometimes you find you are caught inside it, and there is very little that you can do. So what you need to do is you should find your safest route out of the water through the shortest distance. But you can always use objects like a stick to test the water in front, because the eyes can cheat you.
So if I'm driving, I stop the car, look for a stick, go dip it in the water just to see how deep it is?
No, when you're walking, if you are in a car, you need to just drive out through the shortest route from the moving waters. But sometimes if you find the waters are rising too fast, then you need to abandon the car and move to safety. Because what happens is that if the levels come up, even the door may not open because there is some pressure from outside that will stop the door from opening, and even the electrical systems for rolling down the windows may also fail. So you have a very short time to make a quick decision to evacuate to safety before it worsens.
What if you are in a situation where these are flash floods and they've caught you, you are inside your vehicle? You did not have time to evacuate, you did not have time to abandon the vehicle, so you find yourself in the middle of the road and the water is here. What do you do?
If you are in a car, you should always, you know what sometimes disturbs people is they want to prevent the car from getting swept.
Trying to save your car first.
Yes, instead of saving themselves. But you see, the car is replaceable, not like your life. So you need to prioritize your life, then you need to move to safety. Sometimes it's easier to move out of water after leaving your car.
So if you can abandon the car, probably just evacuate yourself through the window and get into the water. It's much safer for you.
Yes, because if you get stuck inside your car, the car will be swept alongside yourself, and it will be difficult to move out of the car as it moves downstream. But if you get out, for instance, if you're able to at least try some swimming, you can at least get yourself somewhere to safety and help yourself. But if you get stuck in your car, there's no need of putting a lot of value to the car. It is replaceable.
Okay. Bwana Mwakazi, what about pedestrians, people on foot? Because we see a lot of people trying to cross and probably they feel safer, probably they know how to swim. And they feel, I will survive. If at all I can swim in an ocean or a lake, I may be able to swim through this as well.
I am yet to see an expert in swimming who can be able to swim across a flooded river like what we were seeing in the river, the velocity of those moving waters, not even an expert swimmer can be able to swim through that river. So don't try. Even if you are a best swimmer, don't try. But I would say, to add to what he has said, whatever the circumstances, use your best judgment. We may not be able to really describe what you should do because each scenario may present itself differently. But like he said, there are circumstances where you find yourself, you need to cross a river, because doing so, you may move to a safer ground, because if you stay there, there could be more waters coming, yes, and the chances of you being swept by not crossing the river that is almost being flooded may put you at more risk going back than moving forward. So use the best judgment. If crossing that river, which is almost being flooded, and it is safer to do so, is the best decision to make that decision and make it fast. But it is important to know that when, especially in situation of flash floods, where water is coming from a different point where it could have rained and where you are is just water coming, you need to take very fast actions.
Can you paint a picture for us describing the difference between normal floods and flash floods and how to react to each of these scenarios? Because sometimes where I am, ndio kuna maji, and we are used to crossing like what we are seeing on the screen. What is the difference when it's now an issue of flash floods?
Those who live in northeastern Kenya, there are things they call them lagers. These are dry or riverbeds. I'll give an example in Moyale. Moyale is at the lower side of Ethiopian highlands. So it could be very dry down in Moyale, Funyanyata area, but it is raining heavily in Ethiopian highlands out of our eyesights. So because water will just flow using the riverbeds, which we are considered to be dry riverbed by those who are at the lower side. But water is flowing to areas where it has not rained. So at the riverbed, there could be children playing, there could be animals that are walking through, there could be people who are harvesting sand. So just water come where it has not been rained, it has not been raining, it has rained elsewhere, and these waters come in high volumes and moving very fast. So that's what we call the flash floods. It's not only true that flash floods happen where it has not been raining. It could be raining, but not as heavy where you are. But it's also raining very heavy in other parts. And you don't anticipate that this little rain will result into floods. But water coming from elsewhere, like we saw water coming from Ngong Hills, causing havoc in at the river and the lower parts of other parts of Machakos. It is not true that it rained very heavily in Machakos to cause floods. These waters were coming from elsewhere. So those are the flash floods we are talking about.
Because there's the issue of waterways and the kind of human activity that has taken place over the years in places that have been dry for so many years. In fact, no one has ever seen water in that area. But it is actually a waterway, because they say that water will always find its way. But how easy is it for people to actually identify such areas that this is actually a waterway and no human activity is supposed to take place here? Places where actually some human activity has taken place over the last 20 years, and there's no instance of flooding. Then all of a sudden, there's floods.
Yeah, I think people should always know what looks like a waterway, because if either sides of where you are staying is hilly, it is appointed that you are on a riverbed, only that there is no water. And the fact that there is no water is not a guarantee that you should start development. But I think what is more worrying is that many people know that a river at one point passed here. But
even if it was 50 years ago?
Yes. You find that they know that there was a river somewhere here, but they continue with the development, ignoring such kind of warnings. that there was a river that was flowing along this line. Some people have intentionally even diverted the direction of the waterway, thinking that they have diverted it permanently. But you know, when you interfere with the nature, nature will respond, but in a bad way that will affect you and even your life. So people should always avoid putting constructions in areas that look like waterway.
How possible is this in a situation where we have informal settlements, we have urban developments? Nairobi, the way it looks now, is not the way it looked 20 years ago.
Yeah, sure.
So how easy or how possible or how easy is it to identify a waterway within Nairobi?
You see, before somebody puts up a construction, they normally go through an approval. And one of the steps that they are required to do is environmental impact assessment. And if you do all these things well, you will know that you are doing a construction in a wrong place. But most people go through shortcuts. They want to have shortcuts in doing the environmental impact assessment. They want shortcuts in getting approvals to do construction, because there is urban planning that has already ensured that most of the towns have urban plans in place. But what is lacking sometimes is the enforcement of these plans, because what we see most of the time are houses which are demolished after they are constructed. Then you ask yourself, how did this person even imagine of doing construction here? And if it was approved, why did this person approve it if it was not under influence of some corruption or something like this? And in the aftermath of all these things, you find that we lose life, we lose property, we displace people who sometimes may not know what they needed to know at that point. But it is the developers that are risking the lives of people. So if you notice that you are in a place that looks like a riparian area, you shouldn't wait for the heavy rains. When it is safe, you should find alternative areas to stay. If it's a rental apartments, I mean, there are several areas that you can look for rental. But when it comes to informal settlement, it's sometimes a catch-22 situation. Because first of all, the houses are not habitable.
They're not permanent.
Yeah, they are not permanent. And you find these people are trying to make a living out of...
maximize on any space
available.
Because so we understand that there's some laws, especially on building along riparian reserves, and the amount of space that you should leave.
Yes.
But in informal settlements, it may not be possible to actually enforce some of these rules. Even in some very affluent areas, it is still not possible to do. We've seen even areas like Runda experiencing a lot of flooding. Now, are we saying that Runda and Kibera are facing the same issue?
The issue of disaster management need to be integrated in all facets of development. In our physical planning, we need to think about mitigating disasters in our planning. For example, recently there was a more than 7% magnitude of earthquake that happened in a country in Asia. But because of thinking ahead and planning ahead, there were very few casualties, because the buildings, the way they're built, and they have skyscrapers, they could withstand that high magnitude. Now here in Kenya, we need to really enforce, because the laws are there. We have physical plans, urban plans, clearly indicate where we have rivers. We have laws that tell us be 30 meters away from the riparian land. Number two is awareness, community awareness on disaster mitigation. Early this week, our teams, together with other integrated teams, we were in Madare, and we could see the frustration of the county commissioners, the chief and the assistant chief and even the vigil elders, trying to tell people move away from the river. But people are not moving. People are not moving. Okay, of course, there is a valid question, where will I go? But you'd rather keep moving and be alive than say, where will I go, and lose your life or lose your loved ones. So I think they couldn't really comprehend why are we being asked to move? The danger that was, the impending danger, they could not fully comprehend it.
Okay.
So even in school, in school, we need also to integrate disaster management in our curriculum.
My question now is, I know St. John Ambulance is engaged in probably when it comes to disaster management, safety, and probably rescue.
Yeah.
But in this issue of preparedness, even from World Vision, how much or at what point do you plug in? Because you can actually see from your experience that this is a disaster waiting to happen. But we mostly encounter St. John, World Vision, probably even the Red Cross after disaster happens. When it comes to preparing and mitigating towards avoiding disaster, where do you plug in?
Disaster management is a cycle. We have the preparation stages, we have the mitigation, we have response, and then we have reconstruction or recovery. Now, we need to focus more on mitigation and preparedness so that we avoid spending more resources on response and recovery because it's very expensive. Now, early warning was issued for these floods in early this year, February, by the weatherman. Congratulations to the weatherman. And World Vision, together with other stakeholders, we have been passing these messages in communities where we work that rains are coming. And in areas like Tana River, where we work, we have been passing this message together with the Red Cross. And you know, Red Cross has also sent millions of messages to residents. Good enough, there are some people who moved actually. It's not fair to say that there are some people, totally people did not head. We have seen people moving to safer areas. But also we have...
In sparsely populated areas.
Yes, in sparsely populated areas. But also in urban areas where people ask, where can I go? Now, you are living in a rented premise. It's not yours, it's a rented premise. And you have been given like 3 months early warning that where you stay, there is likelihood of flooding. But now people ask, I have a deposit. I pay deposit. If I just leave my deposit, so somebody sees the deposit of that house rent and stays there. You know, we are not talking of Mathare alone. There are people who are affected in areas that you wouldn't imagine, like you said, Runda. Areas like Kimau, they were seriously affected. And unfortunately, majority of them, those are their residents, permanent residents. But the message that we want to pass to people is that you would rather leave that house and come and deal with the water later. And
does this information always get to the right people? Because places like Athi River, Syokimau, where we've seen construction going on, these are more or less middle-class neighborhoods where people they get this information from TV, from social media, and all this. But we may be focusing more on places like Mathare, where probably waterways have been blocked and it's obvious. But other places that are yet have not previously experienced this kind of flooding, are we saying they probably may have missed these warnings completely?
Well, it's a complicated issue. One is like a developer, a commoner, somebody who just gotten a loan and they want to build a house. They have a plan which has been stamped and given a clean bill of health by the authorities. Just you can go ahead and construction. That gives somebody some level of confidence that if my plan was approved, then where I am is, it could be a safe place, that could not be true. And in this era where we have technology to help us even in our planning and even in our focusing, we need to do better than what we are.
So it means there's a lot of misinformation on areas that are risky. Places like where we've seen some very affluent houses, especially in the river, in huge modern residential estates built there. Are we saying that the developers, all these people ignored information, or is it that this information was never there?
I think when it comes to either somebody choosing where to develop or where to stay, one step that normally misses is people should always try to assess the dangers that they could face in a particular environment. So you find, for instance, even if you ignore the floods, there are other more dangers. Like now with the heavy rains, there are chances of buildings caving in because either there was poor workmanship or substandard materials. But very few people take an assessment of where they live to know whether they stand a risk that there is a probability of even where I stay caving in or even flood coming in. But even if somebody attempted to do that, just a simple assessment could really go a long way in saving life. Because when you try to imagine the kind of dangers that you could face in your environment, you could at least eliminate some of them. If you look around and you see this is the plain area that water can accumulate if there is heavy rain, just by looking around, you should immediately know that there is a risk that I may face while staying here. If you find that you are living in a house where the basement, for instance, is ever flooded and there is water, you should always imagine that one point this building will cave in, or there are some cracks which have started showing, or even a very small amount of rainfall, there is an accumulation of some flash floods around. These are indicators that should be telltale signs that you really should make a decision of whether you should live here or shift to another area. This is why I think involving the locals in awareness matters. And that is why, for instance, at St. John Ambulance, we've been trying to put up community emergency response teams who are local people who are trained and equipped. So you find these people find it easy to speak to their neighbors in a language that they understand after getting trained. And we, of course, put our focus on high-risk areas which could face more dangers. We may not cover every area, but at least we try to cover the areas which are having too much risks.
And probably when it comes to St. John Ambulance, our interaction with St. John Ambulance, even just the name ambulance, the imagination is that this comes after the fact. This comes probably when it comes to rescue or attending to emergencies. Are you saying you're also involved in awareness campaigns before disaster strikes?
Yes, in fact, what we do is has very little to do with the response. Because we, in this country, we don't have a lot of disasters like other countries. You know, we don't have earthquakes. We don't have tornadoes. Most of the disasters we have are more weather-related disasters. When there is heavy rainfall, we have a problem. When there is very little of it, we also have a problem. But what we do is we try to inculcate this culture of safety first and preparedness. So if you go to schools, you'll find we have trained so many school children on first aid and emergency response and disaster preparedness from the age of 6 years. So this person is growing up knowing how to assess the dangers in where they live, how to prevent them, how to mitigate them, and if everything fails, they know how to respond. So we train people, and in a year we train over 26,000 people across the country on how to prevent, mitigate, and handle some of these disasters. But of course, some of them require huge investments, and this is where the authorities are now called upon to come in. But at least we have prepared a pool who are able and equipped to handle the emergencies in their local environments.
A lot of this flooding happening currently happens at a time when schools are out. It's during school holidays, so children are at home. But starting next week, children are going back to school. That compounds the problem for even your teams. How prepared are you in as far as handling the school communities in areas that are vulnerable?
Yeah, it is indeed, like you said, it is an issue that requires all stakeholders to work together, because these are people who are running for their lives, and the only place they can see is a school. But on Monday, the schools will be in session, and therefore they can't continue being
schools are already being used as emergency shelters.
Yes, but currently I know the responders have been advised to try and use alternatives like the places of worship in preparation for school opening. But even as we talk about the issues of schooling, you know, there are issues that obviously we can see that people have been affected, they have moved. But there are also other issues that we need to think about that are silent and are not observable about this schooling. As we open the schools, for example, in Mathare and other places that have been affected, those who we expect to be in class are some of the learners who, for the past 1 week, some of them have not been sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
We are talking about learners who, some of them have lost their dear ones, or they saw their siblings being washed away, or they don't know where they are. They don't know whether the missing family member is still alive or dead.
Mm-hmm.
So even as we talk about resuming learning next week, we need to think in areas that are affected. How are we going to take care of the psychological needs of the learners who have witnessed these issues? Number two is some of these learners have been spending without food because whatever the little they had has been washed away. And even in those rural areas, there are some farms that have been washed, acres of lands have been washed away. And so we think about the nutritional status of these children. And like, for example, World Vision, we have an enough campaign which we are carrying up. We were saying we need to make sure that there is enough food for all the children and all the people at all times, and make sure that the children are getting nutritious food to help them develop, learn as they should. But do we expect a child who has been out for the whole week, their parents will have nothing really to fit that description of a child who is having enough nutritious food? Is not possible. So we are discussing about classrooms, desks, and the areas of learning and materials. Some children, even their books have been washed away. As we go back, this child doesn't, all the books, all the notes, all the bags they used to carry have been washed away. So they are going back to school without a uniform, without materials. So we need to think at this problem holistically.
Okay. And the president yesterday directed that authorities evict families living in flood-prone areas. And the impact of such a declaration, especially on these families, because yes, we see, and maybe people wonder, why are you supplying blankets and mattresses? Kindly take us through the need when such a declaration is made by the president, and what it would mean in a place like probably Tana River or Mathare, when families have to be evicted by force.
Yeah, probably, I think His Excellency, the President, used a strong term, but he meant to evacuate them to safer areas, which is the only thing that we have left to handle the population. So during such circumstances, it's not a comfortable time, but it's really meant to ensure that people continue with their lives as closer to their normal lives as possible. So there's the aspect of food and non-food items. People need to sort their basic requirements. That is some kind of shelter where they can sleep, whether it's not good enough, but at least some kind of shelter, some kind of food that they can eat, and they can be guaranteed that tomorrow or the day after they will have something to eat, as well as non-food items, things like toiletries that they can use. But also more important is to look at the aspect of sanitation, because when you bring many people together, there's the aspect of sanitation that you need to look after, because there's a lot of sharing of resources. So there needs to be some kind of waste management mechanism that is in place. So this also calls for psychosocial support, because when somebody is displaced from where he has been ordinarily been staying, they are affected psychologically. So there's also need for that psychological, psychosocial support to them, so that they can at least live with the aftermaths of what is happening.
Okay. Hold that thought. It's time for us to take a break. We'll continue with this. What comes after the disaster has already happened. We've talked about safety and what to avoid, but now what happens after the disaster? You're watching Morning Cafe. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Cafe on TV 47 with me, Fred Indimuli. I'm still in studio with Fred Majiwa, Head of Program, St. John Ambulance, and Gershon Mwakazi, Director, Disaster Management at World Vision. We've continued focusing on the floods disaster. And for the first half of this show, we're talking about what to do to prevent yourself from, or to save your life, to ensure you're safe from these floods. But now we want to see what happens after disaster strikes. And we're talking about some of the probably alternative shelter and the problems that occur with that. But Majiwa, you had mentioned earlier that some of the issues that come with the flood water, including sanitation, because the sewage system could be destroyed in places, for example, areas that have informal settlements and they do have pit latrines. There's an effect when there's a lot of flood water. What kind of other problems away from the water that could kill you are we looking at?
Yeah, so there are a lot of sanitation issues that come into play, especially with these disasters, because you find when there are these flash floods, then there's the chance of even the raw sewer mixing with the water that is already out. So in this aftermath, people need to now look for how to prevent secondary disasters that may happen. Because after these scenarios, you may start seeing issues of cholera, the water and vector-borne diseases coming on board. So
at a time when doctors are on strike.
Oh, yes.
That compounds the problem even further.
Yeah, sure. So this should be prevented. So as an ordinary citizen, you need to worry about yourself and take some precautions. So you need to ensure that even the water that you use, you actually make some treatment to it, either by boiling or adding some treatment pellets to it, so that it cannot cause contamination to yourself.
Because this could actually, the flood water, contaminated flood water, could find its way into the normal water supply in homes.
Exactly. Okay. And sometimes even the pipes that supply the home, some of them burst, and you see there's some kind of mixing. So that's why sometimes you find even the domestic water supply from non-water supply companies, some of them you may find there can also be contamination. And that's why you find at times there are people examined and diagnosed with the H. pylori, which is some kind of contamination happening on the water that is supplied to the domestic. So even the tap water that you use, you should at least take some extra caution with it to ensure that you...
So I could be sitting somewhere in my home and I've not seen floods anywhere,
yeah, sure.
a radius of a kilometer around my home,
yes.
And I'm thinking I'm safe. Maybe I'm not.
You may not, because where that water is coming from, you do not know actually what happened from the source to up to the time you receive the water. So some basic boiling, adding chemicals to it to at least treat it could save you a lot, instead of getting infected with diseases like cholera, which is ordinarily witnessed immediately after these seasons of floods and flash floods. The other one is that you find most infrastructures are destroyed, so there may be no existence of things like toilets which are adequate. So there shouldn't be temptation to go and relieve yourself in an open place, because that will only worsen the environment where you are living. So despite the hard condition, we should also try to contain ourselves to using a safer disposal mechanism when people are relieving themselves. So these are mechanisms that are needed to be put in place to prevent people who have faced floods, again, facing water and vector-borne diseases.
Okay. Yeah. And Bwana Mwakazi, we've had the authorities, and when I say authorities, it's county government, national government, being accused of being too slow in reacting to the disaster, being too slow in actually accused of lack of preparedness towards preventing disaster. So when it comes to a situation where they're now reacting after the fact, are they still as slow? Do you find yourself as World Vision and St. John Ambulance and other organizations having to step in spaces where the government should be, but are yet even to comprehend the situation?
As I answer that question, allow first me to go back to what you had said earlier, that the president has given directive. May I urge our listeners and those who are watching this morning, please heed to what the president has said and cooperate with the responders, cooperate with the police, cooperate with the youth service, cooperate with all the actors. Mm-hmm. And if you're asked to move, please cooperate and move. And for several reasons. One, we could be asked to move because the buildings where people are living have been assessed and found to be compromised because of the floods. Number two, why you are asked to move is you are being moved to places where you can also be assisted. Like, for example, for those who are responding, giving people some life-saving materials, that is being done in a central place. And some registration has to be done to identify who, like how many, what are the needs. So please, I just want to urge those who are listening, please cooperate with the police and authorities and all the responders. Okay. Now, coming to the question that you have just asked about what we are seeing, especially in county governments, and could we do better? Yes, the answer is yes, because talking about over 38 people who have lost their lives and some missing.
Now it's over. They put it at 45.
Yeah, standard put it at 45. Yes. And I know as more rescue continue, we pray that these figures will not go up, because those who are missing, if we don't know whether they'll be found alive or dead. We cannot say that the government can do it alone. The government rightfully has asked that let it be a coordinated and multi-agency, multi-sector response. And even in the planning, the government is bringing on board, yes, all the government departments. They have been in meetings. The government has called for donors. I have also called for non-state actors, including the private sector, to chip in. So doing that is not a bad thing. But are we prepared enough, especially at county levels? Mm-hmm. I would say no. I would say and advocate that may our county governments, in their integrated development plans, as they plan for 5 years in the integrated development plans, please be more intentional in integrating disaster management in their plans. Okay. For example, we were asked early enough since the warning, not just this year, even last year when we were...
There was El Nino.
El Nino.
And one would think that by now there's enough built-in capacity to react to...
There was El Nino and we were asked, can you please unclog the waterways? We saw some initiative happening in Nairobi, but it seems we stopped halfway. We have seen that in some areas where people are affected by floods today, there are areas where people could have been asked to move before it started raining, considering the early warning that was given. Actually, in disaster management, early warning needs to be translated into early action. If early warning is not translated into early action, then it becomes like what in security they say, actionable intelligence, that you know mm-hmm. there is a security risk somewhere, and if you don't act, people are maybe likely to lose lives. For example, a terror attack. So securities talk about the actionable intelligence to act fast. So we had actionable early warning that was given, which we could do better as security. But now it has happened. We would say, can we learn from what has happened? Work the government, both national and the county government, to allocate more resources, where the state actors require support from non-state actors in terms of capacity building. We are there to work alongside the government.
One would imagine that after the El Nino, at least this capacity that Bwana Mwakazi talks about would have been built to some extent, that probably even now when you talk about relocating families and vulnerable groups to safer ground, that should have already been thought ahead of time, that in case this happens, we even know the space where we'll take them. And is that in place? Is there any semblance of that? Let's even use Nairobi as an example.
You see, what is happening now, we are in response, and our focus is saving lives and property. But what sometimes does not happen is when we move to recovery phase, this is where we should bring back better. That is, if our drainage systems failed, we should not repair them back to the condition they were before the floods. We should make them better than they were before. If there are bridges which have been destroyed, we should construct bridges which can withstand a similar or even a stronger wave of hazards as compared to the previous one. So the aspect of building back better, I think, is one of the aspects that has been missing. So if people find, for instance, the drainage was just filled with some kind of debris, and then they removed it, but there was still floods, they should build better drainage system. You find that some of the areas, the drainage system is the one which was done during the colonial period, when there were very lesser risks to deal with as compared to now. And as it happens now, we should build back a better system that can withstand. But this is what is lacking. Probably, I think, because some counties, for instance, have not designated specific departments that look after the aspect of disaster risk management. So there is really no specific person who is in charge of ensuring that all these plans are followed through and through. They have put in some legislations and some frameworks, but sometimes you find the funding mechanism is also not there. What we have in the country is, for instance, the contingency fund, which actually waits for the disaster to happen, and then you
that you can spend it. You cannot spend it before the disaster.
Yes, but if we have some funding mechanism which allows you to spend on a disaster that has not happened, then this saves a lot. And this is yet to happen. But luckily, we have a bill in Parliament that is enacting, that is putting in place an authority in charge of disaster risk management. And this authority will be having funds, and the same will be replicated in the counties.
Are we saying it's an issue of legislation that we've been, probably because of the legal framework, we've not been able to prepare well?
You know, as at the moment, for instance, even if you look at the government system, there are so many agencies and departments that are dealing with disasters that have been integrated. You find there are some portions, for instance, in the devolution ministry, there are some portions in interior, and the likes. So when there
used to be special programs.
Yeah, things like that. So you find when there are issues of even wanting to really put an authority into accountability, it's very easy to shift blame. But when it is focused around one single authority, for instance, now we have an authority in charge of road safety, you will not run from this to the other, but you focus your energy on the authority that should put in place systems that work when we need to mitigate, prevent, respond, and recover from these disasters in a systematic way. So if we have all these, I think we will work together. We already have frameworks that put multi-agency working mechanisms. For instance, now even at the national level, there's a multi-agency coordination team. At the counties, there are multi-agency teams working together so that they put together their resources, they put together their energies into solving these same problems. But now what will happen is after it is over and we need to put in recovery and building back better, then you find it starts disintegrating, and then we come back to the same situation again. Next time.
And there's a space of technology now. Everyone is looking at technology as the next frontier. And in terms of providing solutions on road safety, we've seen at least the Met department is really using technology well in as far as forecasting. And it can even give minute by minute, hour after hour, and days prior, and tells you this exact place, this amount of rainfall is expected. Is there an opportunity in as far as disaster preparedness from your level where technology can come in and change all these weaknesses that we see?
Yes, indeed. Technology, if we think about disaster mitigation without considering technology, doing things the archaic way, we'll be missing it. We need to invest in technology in terms of rescue missions, technology in terms of even in the preparedness. Are we constructing bridges that we are applying technology for them to be able to withstand different types of shocks, including flooding? We are, even in the rescue mission, you saw what happened in Machakos. What really applying technology, using drones to survey the area, and that to help to identify the boy who was a young boy, 5 years, who was marooned. The use of technology in disaster preparedness and in disaster response. So to answer you, we need to invest in technology, both at preparedness level, but also preposition, technology savvy, equipments for rescue. Because in as much as we will prepare, we can't rule out the fact that there are situations that will lead to emergencies. So we also need to invest on technology, current technology in our rescue missions. Like, for example, sorry to say, there are people where we could have used modern boats to rescue them.
Yet Kenyans were laughing when the governor suggested that he would invest in buying boats.
In buying boats, yes, but that would have helped. Even in Runda, we were seeing some things which look like bathtubs that people were using to
float,
to remain afloat.
So inflatable boats could actually assist in some of these rescue missions.
Yes, could assist. Truly, we also need to invest in heavy machinery. Some of these things, like in developed countries, when, they may not be in the hands of the public, they could be in the hands, for example, in the military or the police unit in charge of disaster management, but also the ability to deploy them timely for them to rescue, like in areas that people are marooned, like in Kilifi Marafa area. As of the day before yesterday, there were villages that were marooned because of now the waters that are coming from Nairobi, finding their way to near the ocean. There were villages that were marooned. So if we could use technologies like to airlift them quickly, because even the responders could not cross the rivers that are coming with the roofs that have been washed from Madare, trees, big trees, responders could not cross to reach them. So
anything to add on the issue of technology, because some common mwananchi thinks that some ideas are over the top?
No. Technology cuts across all levels. From the early warning, at least nowadays we are not in the era of manyunyu and the likes.
Things on the wall.
Yeah, but you can at least get live updates minute by minute, which is kudos to the Med Department. So early warning, I can say we are doing well. The other aspect of technology that we have to use is areas of data collection, because we have to make decisions based on available data, in collecting data. Geospatial technology, trying to even foresee 50 years ahead. So you find most developed countries, they foresee that in 50 years' time, the level of water for this bridge will be at this level. So when they are doing construction, they consult geospatial experts to try and inculcate such kind of technology.
It was shocking to see thicker superhighway being blocked by floods. That's something they would have picked out long ago.
Probably, yeah. And the other one is in awareness. You see, nowadays everybody is on mobile phone, and if we have apps that give people things like mapping of risky areas and even awareness on what to do around such kind of things. Basic technologies can really change a lot in the field of managing these disaster risks that we have.
And this will achieve if we also partner with private sector, because most of this technology is in the hands of the private actors. Like now, our teams what are doing, like in Madare, today and tomorrow, we want to assist those families with food and other than food items. But we are not taking physical items there. We are using technology through Safaricom, register these people, transfer money to them,
Okay.
The shops are still functional. Supermarkets are still there. They rush there and get the items, which they need.
Instead of taking physical
and cause chaos, cause people to line up. That's still use of technology, cash, using cash transfers. So when you talk about technology, it's not about the big things. Even what the technology that we have currently, we can use it. Using, like, for example, in data collection, using tools like the combo tool, where you use a mobile phone, collect people's data, information is uploaded, and it reduces the lead time between the time you are collecting data and the time you are responding, almost real time.
I know for sure it will be very useful for any potential home buyer or home owner to actually probably get a virtual simulation of whether or not that area could be vulnerable to floods, even in the next 50 years or so.
Exactly.
That could inform a lot of the decisions. As we wind up, any other information you may want to extend to members of the public as your final comment?
The weatherman has done the good work of giving us expectation of what we will see in the next few days and even the month. Now, there are disasters which are related to these heavy rainfalls, which have already been alerted to us. So one of them is floods, but there are still others. We have people who probably may have the temptation of warming themselves with the charcoal jikos, and that brings the danger of poisoning with the carbon monoxide. And if somebody has to use the charcoal jiko at this time, then they have to ensure there is proper ventilation. We have chance of buildings which are poorly constructed caving in. If you are in such building, you need to take caution. Our roads are really not visible when there are heavy rainfalls and they are slippery. So when people drive around, they should take extra caution to ensure that they drive at a speed that they can control. And because there is poor visibility, at least there will be fewer accidents that are witnessed. There are chances of even electrocution and lightning in areas like Western Kenya, where you find when there are stormy rainfalls, there is chance of lightning. So people need to shelter. And those who have already sheltered need to avoid being on the windows, because all these are disasters related to heavy rainfall that have already been issued as an alert to us. And if we all take precautions and authorities also enhance their efforts and even build back better, then I think we will be better as a country.
And you mentioned something interesting about electricity, because we've seen a lot of these electric lines also being destroyed and pulled down into the water.
Yeah, sure.
And that must be presenting a lot of trouble, especially in informal settlements.
Yeah, so at a time like this is not the time to really walk on pools of water. If you can avoid, it's not a time to just touch, even the street light poles for street lights, and even exposed fences or even clotheslines which are wired, because the chance of electrocution can be quite high. You don't know at what point the water connects to electricity. So people should avoid such kind of dangers. And when it happens, please do not go and hold somebody who has been electrocuted. Chance of also you getting electrocuted is very high. So you should use an insulated material, wood, or any kind of material that does not conduct electricity to try to remove the source of power from this person, or pull this person out of the source of power, even before attempting any first aid to them.
Yeah.
Finally, Bwana Mwakazi.
Yeah, I would say that even speaking to our responders and fellow Kenyans, I would urge that we integrate protection of vulnerable populations like children and women and elderly in this response. At such a time, there are people with evil minds who would, for example, want to take advantage of people who have moved from their homes to go and rape women or harm children in where they are. So let's integrate protection of the vulnerable groups, and let's be our brother's keeper. And I would ask even those who are moving, please don't just move. Move to a place that will be considered safe, so that you don't open up yourself to other secondary harms like meeting criminals, being raped, and being exposed to even other dangers like contacting HIV/AIDS and other diseases or being harmed by robbers. And number two, I would say that let's also think about gender-sensitive response, because the needs of women, the needs of children, and the needs of the elderly may not be the same as the able-bodied people. It's not just about food and water. There are other needs that are specifically for women at such a time that may not be easily spoken. So as we respond, let's know that there are special needs that are required for women, for children, like special food for children, special needs like sanitary pads for women as we respond, and other special needs. But let's do what we can. And lastly, I will insist, heed the information. When you are asked to move, move.
Okay.
Thank you.
And part of that information comes straight from the president. President William Ruto yesterday directed that the authorities evict families living in flood-prone areas. He has also directed the National Youth Service to provide land to settle those in the most affected regions. The KDF will also provide specialized services to protect people from the adverse effects of the downpours. And as the experts say, once you're told to do something, please heed to the advice. So far, according to the Standard, 45 people have been killed, tens of thousands displaced by the raging floods, and the weatherman says the situation could actually get worse in the coming days. Thank you so much, Fred Majiwa, Head of Programs, St. John's Ambulance. St. John Ambulance.
St. John.